Hello and welcome to the Full Court Press, where we take a look at the global hydrogen market and we ask what is next for a market that some are calling the new oil of the 21st century. My name is 𝗦𝗰𝗹𝗂𝗧. I'm the director of the Energy Transition Dialogues at Gulf Intelligence, and I am delighted to welcome Dr. Laura Nelson today. Laura is the Vice President at Strategen. She also serves as Executive Director of the Green Hydrogen Coalition. Dr. Nelson, thank you very much for joining us.
Michelle, it's really great to be with you, and I am so pleased that you're having this conversation around hydrogen, because we've been hearing, for at least a couple of decades that hydrogen is just around the corner, right? And it absolutely seems like we've reached a tipping point. So I'm excited about our conversation today and providing information on what we see for the hydrogen economy going forward.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. And the tipping point, it seems to be happening with flare. If we look at the Middle East alone, in the last couple of weeks, there have been an array of announcements, green hydrogen, in terms of green hydrogen projects specifically. So Dubai has launched its first industrial scale green hydrogen project in the region. Oman announced plans to build one of the largest green hydrogen plants in the world. We have Saudi with its NEOM-related project, obviously. Earlier this year, we heard talks about Saudi and Germany for potential export-import tie-ups, as well as Riyadh and Moscow talking about working together on hydrogen in the last week or so as well. And the idea that a green hydrogen market in the Middle East could have an estimated value of $300 billion a year. And of course, this is against the backdrop of oil prices being rather stagnated and huge talks about peak oil possibly within the decade as well. So the dynamics are dramatically changing and at such speed after that 20-year lag that you just mentioned as well. Against that backdrop, I'd be really keen to hear what your thoughts are about the Middle East, historically the world's biggest oil producing region, and its future as a hydrogen hub, a globally competitive hydrogen hub, and perhaps by the early 2030s. How do you see that playing out, please?
Well, I think, it is really exciting to see what's happening globally when it comes to green hydrogen. I feel like I can't really, look at the news on any given day and not see an announcement about a significant project. And it's, you've got governments and you've also got corporations that are implementing policies. They're stating policies around what they want to do to manage carbon emissions, to address climate change, and really create competitive opportunities for the future. And so it is exciting to see this happening. I think that we see resources really across the globe are different. And the Middle East, of course, has been our oil center. And if we're going to see that decline in oil demand as companies really look to replace that with a green molecule, such as green hydrogen, I think it's only natural that they're going to pivot so that they remain competitive in that marketplace. But I think that we're going to see, and we are seeing, green hydrogen initiatives emerging everywhere. Japan, of course, has been very involved in the hydrogen economy, making investments in infrastructure, liquefied hydrogen facilities, piloting maritime options in partnership with Australia. And in the United States, where I live, we have really the first global conversion of a coal-fired plant to a green hydrogen facility targeted to be online in mid-2025. So I think we're going to see the emergence of green hydrogen projects that really take advantage of local resources to help remain competitive, whether we're looking at the oil sector, the power sector, natural gas. All of these things are going to come into play as we see a transitioning energy economy from one that is more carbon intensive to one that's significantly lower in terms of its carbon intensity.
And mid-2025, that's not long, to essentially walking the walk of the theory behind these sorts of projects. Mid-2025 it's not a long way to go whatsoever. And obviously we're seeing huge progress in Europe as well. We're within the roadmap already for hydrogen. It's already underway, and they've got big advancements going there, big goals to advance going there, which I'd like to touch on shortly as well. Just for now, I'd like to know from your perspective, what do you think needs to be the focus, the near-term focus, in terms of aligning stakeholders around landmark capital and infrastructure projects? How to better marry those two worlds?
Oh, wow. That is that is really the challenge. I think a big part of it is education. And, the Green Hydrogen Coalition in the US is what we consider a nonprofit educational organization. And so we really are motivated to educate, in particular, policymakers about the opportunity for green hydrogen, because what we really see that is needed is regulatory certainty. And when you have that regulatory certainty and a deliberate regulatory framework, you're going to attract investment. And when you attract that investment, then you're going to start scaling, which is going to bring down the cost, which is then, of course, going to make that molecule affordable to end users. So that, I think, is the first step, is really about education, really having a targeted policy approach. And our mission really is to accelerate the policies and practices that will drive a green hydrogen economy at scale. And that means both deployment and use. And so I think that's where it starts. It's education, it's having that structured and deliberate policy. And we are seeing in, locations like Australia and Western Europe, where they have these very structured and deliberate policies, that the green hydrogen investment targets are significant. And so we're seeing them here in the US, driven in part by individual, what we call state policies. But I think that we will see an emergence of more kind of federal consistency going forward. At least that's a hope.
And you just mentioned as well on the education front, that being the crux of where we're at right now. Is there a demand or an appetite to learn as well from industry? How would you describe the appetite within industry to learn? It takes two, of course, teachers and students.
I think industry in many ways is really getting there. I mean, as I mentioned, you see industries with these very significant carbon neutrality targets. Dominion Energy, which operates in my home state, which is Utah, but also has assets in the southeastern US as well, has very specific carbon neutrality targets, and now is looking at testing hydrogen pipeline injection. That's only one example. We see targets globally around green steel production, and how can we get there in less than a decade. I've mentioned what's happening in the power sector. Mitsubishi Power was awarded the combined cycle generator that's going to be used at this Intermountain Power project site. That's the name of the project in Utah. So we see that's just one example of generator technology. We see others that are working on that generation technology in the power sector. So I think, industry—
it's quite even across the board then. There's not a group of those who are slower to adapt and those who are more on the pioneering front. It's actually quite even across the spread.
Absolutely. I think, the interest is really there, and industry wants to get in. They want to be ahead of the curve, so to speak. I mean, we saw within solar and wind, those that are kind of first in, right, are very successful. But what I think has to happen is really the body of stakeholders and really understanding what has to occur on the policy front, what needs to happen in terms of bringing that production and offtake together, and what are the intermediate infrastructure requirements to do that. So you do have, I think, the policy piece, but you've also got that technology piece to assure that we can bring production and supply together. Production and demand together. And we have organized 11 Western states and 2 Canadian provinces in the US, along with 3 additional states with some partner associations, to come together and talk about how do we build a roadmap specific in the Western US to create that ecosystem for efficient and effective green hydrogen development. And so, I think, again, it's back to bringing people together. It's having those conversations, and education is at the base of all of it.
And just doing that successfully in itself is a huge indication of the appetite to progress, because that's what you just detailed is not an easy thing to do logistically, and with so many different agendas as well. And you touched on the infrastructure there as well. And of course, transporting hydrogen is one of the challenges facing the industry, and the using existing gas pipelines and networks offers a potential solution through blending and retrofitting. We've seen Europe's ambitious goal. They've actually upped it recently in recent months to 40,000 kilometers of repurposed gas pipelines to be used for hydrogen or to be hydrogen ready by 2040, which is you know, a landmark move really from the continent. It's a very bold commitment to using what is already there, and also the transition of the gas market as well. So there's a lot of implications there. How do you expect, or how quickly do you expect other countries and regions to deploy such solutions? Do you see this becoming more common?
Well, you know, I think one of the key things you hit on there was that there is a target, right? There is a policy and a politically advised target that is based on their goals to reach certain carbon reductions. We don't really have such a uniform goal in the US, but we are seeing that we can bring together parties to talk about, you know, what are the economic opportunities, what are the environmental opportunities, and of course, what are the carbon reduction opportunities? So that's part of it. So we don't have that target. And given that there is this interest on all of those aspects, and I should add to that the social aspects as well, you know, in terms of, you know, reducing local emissions overall, especially in impacted communities. So you bring together the parties that have different interests, and we say, what can we achieve together? And let's look at, you know, can we get to like a 5% injection standard today? Does that make sense? And we've been talking about, you know, we really need to push. It doesn't have to even be a mandate, but let's start pushing. How can we get a target in place so that you get people coming together, aggregated around a specific goal? And once we can verify that 5% is very doable, in fact, in Hawaii today, they have about 11% by volume hydrogen in their pipeline, then you can start to push it beyond that. And we have institutions like the University of California, Irvine, who's done significant testing on the natural gas distribution center systems, indicating that really you can get up to probably 100% hydrogen within the distribution and low pressure systems. It's really now testing those bigger transportation pipeline systems, but we don't have that target today. And I think that having that target can be an important part of really beginning to see more testing and piloting for injection, although we are seeing it today. I mentioned Dominion, and of course, SoCalGas and others are looking at testing as well in the US.
But the next step, then, you know, in this journey for the US could, as you say, be setting that target and seeing how the existing infrastructure, which is huge volumes in itself, can be leveraged for that. And you mentioned steel earlier, and I'd just like to loop back to that. As we know, steel is responsible for up to 10% of global greenhouse gas emissions, which is, you know, a huge chunk really. Reducing the carbon footprint of the industry will play a crucial part in the overall energy transition. And for many, hydrogen-based production offers the only plausible pathway to carbon-free steel making at scale. So I'd like to know your opinion on if you agree with that, and also what you think can be done in the next few years to make that market viable within the next decade. What's needed for the steel market when it comes to hydrogen?
What is absolutely needed is scale. That commercially available hydrogen at scale, and they need the technology and the infrastructure. And as I mentioned, you know, in Japan, they're working on solutions. We've got, you know, steel manufacturers, for example, in Korea that have specific targets. And I believe that Japan is slated to be doing green steel production, if you will, in the next decade by 2030. And I think that's consistent with the International Energy Agency's projections as well. But really, at the front of this, you know, coupling with education is driving the research, development, and demonstration projects, getting the technologies done. We are fortunate in the US that we have our Department of Energy that's been working on many of these issues for quite some time, and through the hydrogen fuel cell program. And so that has been an important partnership, and also extends globally in building those partnerships. So it is going to be a technology issue, and investing in those technological research, development, and demonstration projects is going to be so important, because you have to be able to make that hydrogen available, and you have to have the infrastructure in place to move it around. And liquefied hydrogen is very likely going to be a part of that equation.
Unfortunately, we have to wrap up, but just before we do, I have one last question, just in terms of creating a clean energy economy for everyone as per the SDGs. How can we adopt an inclusive attitude? What would you like to see when it comes to inclusivity in the clean energy economy?
Well, I'm so glad you said that. I mean, that is my passion and my goal, is that when we look at energy solutions, we really need to be holistic and recognize that there are many people globally that don't have access to reliable or any energy at all, you know, and it's nearly a billion.
Billions of people.
A billion, yeah. So I think we really have to think holistically. Competition, of course, is going to play a part of this. I like to think of it as competition combined with partnership, because it is going to be global partnership, and it's exciting to see these initiatives where you have you know, competitors coming together, like in the Catapult project, to identify how can they drive investment, how can they make significant increases in the production of green hydrogen, where you have countries partnering on coming together to identify targets for a hydrogen economy. For example, the partnership I already mentioned between Japan and Australian industry. So I think that global competition and partnership is going to play a key part in this, because that's going to afford us the opportunity to look holistically across our needs, our resources, and the sectors where we can have significant impact in reducing our carbon footprint.
And it's a healthy method for the market to surge forward as well. A healthy collaborative competition is certainly no bad thing. Dr. Nelson, thank you so much for joining us, and we hope you will join us again soon. I think the market is moving so fast that by the next time we talk, there will be a whole new bucket of information for us to delve into. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Great to be with you. I look forward to talking with you again soon.
Thank you. Thanks.
Bye-bye.